Hey, good morning, everybody. How was the party last night? Yeah, that wasn't the best whoop I've ever heard, but that's probably because of the sore heads. Would that be a good thing? Would that be a good assumption there? I mean, the fact that I got no answer there is a big fat yes, in my opinion. So thank you for getting here today for a 9 o'clock start for our session after the party. I'd like to introduce Jason, and I'll get out your way so you can have some fun time. Round of applause, people.
Hey, welcome everyone. Hope you guys had a good time so far here in Nashville, and we'll go ahead and get started. So my name's Jason Pegley. I'm the Jamf technical lead for Eli Lilly and Company. I want to kind of introduce my team of co-workers here. We got Mark Matthews as our technical architect, is in the audience today. Brian Mark, our service architect, takes care of all of our day-to-day stuff, so he's here as well. Rob Foster, he's our 5G and cellular services lead. Anshu is based out of India, and he leads our shared and IoT devices. And Lorenzia, last, she leads up our app development team. So just kind of give you guys a little glance at of Lilly. We're headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. We were founded 148 years ago. So we have a little over 39,000 employees worldwide. We do clinical research in around 55 countries. Our products are marketed in approximately 110 countries. Kind of a little bit technical background on our side. Our Jamf environment is around 55,000 mobile devices. We have right at 5,000 Macs. And most recently, we started doing watch management. And we have about 170 managed watches in our manufacturing facilities. So this gives a little background on what we do and what our goals for this year were. So our IT leadership really focused in on this year of the themes of eliminate, simplify, and automate. So our team embraced these goals, and we began projects earlier in the year to enhance our Jamf Pro configuration, improve our employee engagement, and proactively identify and resolve issues before they impact employees. So our first step that we did this year, we kind of went through a review of our Jamf configuration. So over time, every environment, it becomes bloated. So we examined our setups, we identified configuration profiles, policy scripts, smart and static groups, even our extension attributes, and figured out what we could eliminate or consolidate. So to date, we've reduced our environment about 50% of our configuration without having any noticeable impact to our users. So one of the other improvements that we've done with the help of our Jamf support team, Joe in particular, was we did a migration from our LDAP services to cloud identity provider. That transition eliminated the need for the Jamf infrastructure manager servers, and kind of greatly reduced our on-premise server requirements and simplified our configuration. Another major project that we worked on this year was re-architecting our Mac enrollment process. This is building on our 2023 JNUC presentations that we did for the Mac enrollment experience with Mark Matthews and myself. So we revised our enrollment process, notification scripts using dep notify. Mainly we did a lot of the custom triggering and reduced the number of policies that we do on our enrollment. and we shortened our enrollment time, gave a better user experience. And we continue to work on this every day throughout the year. So getting into what everybody came for today, I'm going to kind of talk around what we do for our automated efforts. We've been doing automated emails for quite a while around our compliance side of the house. So we got integrations with our Enter ID, our Enter ID logic apps, and we do so mainly our device inventory updates. We automate emails for OS notifications when we have a new OS that we greenlight. We're working on our new enrollment emails and Teams chat integration as we speak. The operation side of this is doing API calls to ServiceNow to automate ticketing. So what I'll do here is we're going to kind of guide you through our automation workflow that using our framework that we put together for using Jamf Enter ID logic apps to send emails when a user's like their mobile devices haven't completed an inventory update in 16 days. The workflow serves as a foundation for all of our activities that we do for our automation. So to start off, to get started here with this, we create our workflows using the Enter ID logic apps. So we do a consumption-based multi-tenant logic app. That allows us to do a per transaction costing model. So for an example, over the last year, we've sent tens of thousands of emails to our user base, and we've spent maybe $50 to $60 because it's a fraction of a cent for each transaction that you do, instead of having a dedicated service or servers to handle this problem. So now with our logic app, you can see we have a logic app created. So we went through, created the transactional consumption-based logic app. We can start using our designer to build the logic app. So to start off, we need to have a trigger. So we need to have something that will start our workflow. So what we do is we create a trigger with the trigger in here is called when an HTTP request is received. We renamed that trigger to the webhook because what we're going to do here and later is we're going to actually create a webhook in Jamf to send this data. So in this trigger, we add the request body for the JSON schema that you can find in the Jamf developer guides. Once we set this up and we hit save, it'll generate a URL for you. That is what you will send from the webhook. So one of the important things here is whenever you create your trigger and it generates the URL, that URL needs to be decoded. So here I put a URL to a site that I use just to do the decoding. Mainly, it takes out the special characters and stuff to make it work. So next in the list here is we go through and we create our smart group. So on this example, we're looking at devices that haven't had an inventory update in 16 days. So we create our smart group here, and then we're going to need to get some information for our devices that come in from the webhook. So we recently this year we went through the whole migration of using just local accounts in Jamf to do API calls. we moved over to the API roles and clients. So when you go into the API roles and clients, mainly you need to create an API role. And for this purposes, what we're doing, all we're doing with this is we're going and grabbing the data from the mobile devices, so you need to have the read mobile device privileges for it. So after the role's created, you need to create the client ID and client secret. So when you go into the clients tab, you'll create a client ID, get generated there, and you assign it to the role. And then whenever it'll generate the client credentials. So this will provide you with the client ID, client secret that you need for the workflow. So next, we're creating our webhook. So this is where you take the decoded URL that was on that we did through the trigger in Logic App, and we take and make the content type JSON, and then we're going to set this webhook event as a smart group membership change. So, and we're going to target the smart group that we identified earlier. And then, you know, for this example, we're not doing anything with the security, but you can actually set up permissions between the Logic App and the webhook so that only this session will go. So if somebody got the URL, they would also need to know the credentials. So now that we're back over into the Logic App Designer. So the webhook's going to be triggered when a device gets put into that group, and it's going to send JSON over to the trigger. So what you have to do is you need to parse the JSON. This gives you a dynamic content that you can actually pick and choose from to say what you want to use from that JSON file. So in the webhook for smart devices, you have multiple things that's in this JSON file. What we're concerned about is when a device gets added. So we want to know when a device hits that 16 days so that we can trigger this workflow. There is also when the device gets removed from the smart group, there will be a remove devices array. But we're concerned right now with just the add devices. So we parse that, which then gives us an array of the device IDs, the Jamf device IDs. So you can kind of see here with the output that most of the time, you're only going to have one device that gets added to this group whenever you're, it's based on when the device becomes 16 days out. So most of the time, the array is going to be a one device ID. If you have all this created and you change the scope of a smart group, this could go through and have, you could have thousands of devices that come into this array. So, but what we're doing here is we're looking at that output. So like we said, like most of the time you're just going to have one, but in the case that you do a smart group change, let's say that you want to change it from 16 days to 21 days, you might get a group of devices that come in at that time. So we do a control for each. So mainly this is a for each loop if you're a coder. So it's going to go through and take action on each of the devices that are in that array. So going back to the client ID and client secret. So you can perform, what we're doing here is we're performing an HTTP action, and we're doing a request to get the OAuth token. So we're providing the client ID and client secret through an HTTP command back to Jamf to get credentials to use that API account. So with our token, we send that off. The token will send back that request will send back the token where we can parse that token out, and we can set up our authentication to actually make the call to utilize that client ID to do our Jamf API calls. So this is where we set up the HTTP call for with the token type and token access token. So as you see, we're actually building that HTTP request for the authentication piece. And we're doing this for each ID that was in the array. So mainly what we're doing is getting the device details for each of those devices. When that comes back, so we're getting, if you ever have done an API call for a specific device, you get the whole list of everything around that device. So you get applications, you get, email, username, password, or email, username, you get the model, serial number, everything that's an attribute for that device you get back. So once again, we're parsing that data so that we can have some dynamic content that we can use in the next step. So once we have all of our data back for that device, we do cleanup. So an API token is by default in Jamf is good for 60 seconds. So if you can make your call, do all your work, that's customizable. You can change the time. But for me, if we're doing an array where we're making this call multiple times over and over and over again, I like to clean up at the end of the actual API call and just invalidate that token so that that token's no longer valid and can't be used. So next is where, so all this work has gotten us to this point where we can send an email. So for our user base, they're accustomed to getting emails from us. So what we do is we have multiple shared mailboxes in our O365 environment. The reason we have multiples for this project is that there is a limitation on how many emails O365 allows you to send from a single account each day. So 10,000 is the limit. So think about if we're sending out an email for a green light for a new OS that we're telling our user base that they're allowed to upgrade. And we have 55,000 devices that we're doing that. So we divide ours up into separate mailboxes to keep that limitation in check. So what we have on the back end is we have a service account that has the O365 permissions, and we've given that service account access to the shared mailboxes, so they can send through that shared mailbox for the emails for the user. So they're not seeing an email from a service account, they're seeing it from our shared mailboxes. And if for some reason there are no reply, but we do monitor them, and if sometimes users will reply to email and that kind of stuff, so we at least have access to that email box to address issues. So what we're doing here with the email is we're utilizing the device details that we got from the API call. We're setting the username, we're setting the email address, and we'll say the device model, serial number. So those are the attributes that we're taking from the API call for each device. So this is a generic example of what we send out. So as you can see, we have hello Jason. That's getting pulled from Jamf as the real name from Jamf, and we tell them which serial number, which device that they're having issues with, and why they're having that issue. So this has evolved over the last few months, and honestly, I don't have slides for it, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So we went to instead of having just a plain text email, we went to an HTML-based email, and we have buttons that we have been able to create inside the email. So one of the big things is when somebody hasn't had a device that hasn't checked in 16, 21, 30 days, more than likely they've taken that device, they've probably gotten a new device, and they've probably taken the old device and threw it in a drawer somewhere. So on the email, when they get it, we have buttons in there now that the user can click a button that they've returned that device to IT, and when they click that button, we have an extension attribute in Jamf that we will trigger to put it into a quarantine state. So we'll lock that device down because the user said they don't have that device anymore. And then one of the future things that we're working on, and we have it in our POC, is we've set up integrations with the API service account for ServiceNow. So what we're working on is the ability for when that user does that return, we're making actions in Jamf to quarantine that device, but we're going to also start creating tickets to our asset management team and our tier 3 teams to do an investigation on why that device hasn't been checking in, where's it at, can we get it back, get it removed from Jamf. The other thing with the return button, we have logic in that whenever they do that, they're exempt from our emails going forward. So that device would, even if that device hit one of our triggers, because it's been marked as returned, we don't send the emails anymore because we don't want to inundate the users with multiple emails. So as I was saying, we have that workflow. We're also working on our ServiceNow integration. We recently started a project where we're taking what we're doing in our emails, and instead of sending, we're gonna start out doing both, and we'll see how it goes and see which type the user kind of likes more. But we're starting to look at Teams integration with sending cards through Teams, Teams chat. So mainly the same information they would get in their email, they would get in a Teams chat. And we've found in other situations where users are more likely to interact with a Teams message than read an email. So, and that's it for me for the actual presentation part.
Are there any questions? Yeah. You were the first one. Right next to you.
All right.
So do you have a way to manage a system or a situation where an email gets sent out and the end user is not responding, and you can maybe send a second email or a third email, and then maybe after a certain amount of time take an action by default, like they haven't responded in 30 days, so we're going to quarantine it anyway?
Yes. So the way we do this is we quarantine on 21 days. We came to a decision that if your device hasn't checked in 21 days, we're going to quarantine you anyway, if you don't respond or anything.
Perfect.
So we consider that a non-compliant device. We use device compliance within Jamf, and that's part of our rules for device compliance. So they're going to get blocked from O365 apps, network, and that kind of stuff. What we do is we have this workflow. We do a 16-day and a 20-day email. So we have two separate smart groups set up. So we send them 2 warning emails that their device is getting ready to be non-compliant.
Okay.
And then on the 21st day, they get another email saying their device has been quarantined for non-compliance.
So essentially, you just have separate workflows.
Separate workflows.
With the same idea in mind, but not one workflow
Yeah.
that repeatedly emails them.
So there is a way that that we're working on implementing to kind of consolidate stuff down. So when you do the webhooks, I could do one logic app with the same webhook URL and have multiple webhooks using that same URL. And part of the JSON that gets sent back from the webhook to the logic app has the webhook name in it. So you can build out one logic app that handles multiple scenarios. So let's say that we're going to combine the 16, the 20, and the 21-day emails into one workflow. we could actually say, based on what the JSON comes back as for the webhook, you're going to do this workflow inside here, or set the variable for your 21 days or your 16 days. So it's the same workflow, you're just setting the compliance action differently. So there is ways to do that.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Hello. Are you signing into the connector with the, how are you signing into the connector on Logic Apps for the shared mailbox to work?
So, it's worth a service account. So we have an Enter-ID service account that, so when you set up the email, you can do, you do the shared email action item in Logic Apps. And when you do that, it asks you what account you want to use to send that email out. So you have to actually do a connection with an account. So we use the service account because it's shared. If I change my if we were to use an individual user's password and we change our password, it's going to break the workflow. So we have a service account that is tied to, that has O365 access to be able to do Teams and Outlook. And then they're part of the group that's part of that shared mailbox.
Okay, because we were using Power Automate, and
Yeah.
for that very reason, if someone left, so we recently started moving things to Logic Apps.
Yeah, so the key to this is that your shared account has to have that O365 access to be able to do email and Teams. So, yeah.
How are you handling people that are on like FMLA, maternity leave, things like that, like exceptions?
So that mainly right now we're getting bounce backs. The email gets sent to them, but they're getting, most of the time that they've had their email turned off on FMLA, we don't allow, their accounts are kind of in a disabled state. One of the things that we're looking at is, since we went from LDAP, so we were using like a global catalog to do the LDAP connection, and we were very limited in what data we could get back. So going to Cloud Identity, we have the full stack of anything that's in Enter-ID for user attributes, we have access to now. So one of the things that we were looking at in our POC environment was, is the user enabled or not in Enter-ID? So we could look at that to determine if they're disabled, we shouldn't be sending an email. So that could be a flag for us to, in the future, to not send those extra emails out.
Any other questions? That was that awkward silence enough. It definitely wasn't 7 seconds of awkward silence, but it was enough. Okay, so another round of applause for Jason. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.